Hi there, it's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and it's the August garden tour. We've had some very extreme weather here in the UK, as have many countries around the world, and we've had our hottest day ever, which was 38.7 degrees, which is nearly 102 Fahrenheit. And of course it caused huge problems with travel, with overhead power cables melting and roads melting and buckling. And it sort of pretty much fried the garden as well. And then, of course, it deteriorated into storms. There was rain, there was wind, and everything that had been fried was then flattened. But it's still been a pretty good year in the garden. I'll first explain what the middle-sized garden looks like. It's an L shape. It's 100 feet long and 80 feet wide at its widest, and 40 feet wide nearer to the house. Because I'm quite busy, I concentrate my main gardening in one huge bed which we can see all year round from the kitchen window, and which you see immediately you step out of the back door. Having all the colour immediately you step out the back door does create a huge impact, and these large clumps of lavender also help. Earlier on in the year, self-seeding plants make a big difference to the garden, and if you're a busy, time-poor gardener, then having lots of self-seeded plants can make your spring and early summer garden look absolutely gorgeous. But round about this time of year, round about August, I find that plants that spread are hugely valuable. Plants that spread, of course, can be invasive, and it very much depends what your garden soil and your climate is like as to whether they spread, they don't spread, or they become invasive. So there's a bit of trial and error. But I'll show you the plants that spread in this garden in case that's a help to you. The plants that spread that have made a big difference in this garden include daylilies, which I literally, at the end of every year, I dig up daylilies that have spread too much and sometimes move them around the garden, sometimes throw them away, sometimes give them to people. Daylilies can be invasive in some parts of the world, so if that's you, then perhaps this isn't a good choice for you. But if you want something that just gives fabulous late season colour and just gets on with it without your having to do anything in the way of fertilising or pruning or anything like that, then daylilies is a great choice. The first year in this garden we've had veronicastrum, and the pollinators just love it. And I understand from what it says on the label that veronicastrum spreads nicely, and I'm really looking forward to that. Crocosmia spreads. If it loves you, Crocosmia spreads fantastically, and obviously once again it is invasive in some parts of the world. In this garden, the Crocosmia, it's Crocosmia lucifer, it just goes like the clappers everywhere. All I ever have to do is just remove the bits I don't want, and so that's a very easy care way of fabulous colour. Japanese anemones, I think they are the most beautiful plant. They are absolutely gorgeous. I personally prefer the white form to the pink form. Once Japanese anemones are established, you won't have to do anything to them. You certainly don't have to feed them. You don't deadhead them. You leave the spires of the flowers for a certain amount of winter interest. They're very dense cover for the ground, so I find that I get fewer weeds in the garden where the Japanese anemones are. But there is one warning. They do spread, and when you want to dig them out, even if you leave the tiniest root behind, they will re-establish themselves. So I think they're best in a border on their own, left permanently. They don't, in my experience, coexist hugely well with other plants, although there is a rose here that has managed to survive being smothered by them. Echinops is another plant that I got a very small little chunk of it from someone, and I've planted it in 2 places, and the pollinators just adore it. It's very big, it's very striking, it makes a really big impact, and fairly soon I'll be cutting this down and I'll get another flush of flowers, and those will be smaller and lower. So it's a bit of a bully, but it's certainly got a great deal to say for itself. Persicarias is another plant that spreads, which I'm trying for the first time this year. Last November, a friend gave me some really small scraps of Persicaria, and they're already clumping up to make lovely clumps, and I think they look really quite good here in this border. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of Persicarias. My friend warns that they not only clump up well, but they absolutely go like the clappers if you've got very damp soil. If you have damp soil and you want to fill it with colour, then Persicaria is your plant. But if you have damp soil and you don't want an invasive plant, then perhaps not Persicaria. Dahlias are not considered to be plants that spread, and I think this is because we dig them up every year. However, I don't dig up my dahlias at the end of the season. I take off the dead foliage and I cover them in compost, and there's more about that in a video in the links below. And because I leave my dahlias in, some of them have really clumped up and spread, and in fact to too much extent. This big dahlia, it's called Orange Cushion, has been here for 10 years and it's formed a huge clump, but it's gone a bit bald in the middle because obviously the oldest dahlia is at the centre, the oldest tuber is at the centre of the clump. And so I've got this huge expanse of dahlias where all the colour is on the outside and there's nothing in the middle. And I really do need to dig these dahlias up this year. I'll probably replant them immediately and cover them with compost, but these have got too big for their boots. And of course, if you're thinking about plants that spread, what about climbers? We have a climber on our back wall called Virginia creeper. It's Virginia creeper henriana, or Chinese Virginia creeper, and it's less invasive than the usual Virginia creeper, and we do have to cut it about twice a year, but an ordinary Virginia creeper we'd have to cut a lot more. So that's another good tip for plants that spread, is just get a less invasive version of them. The Virginia creeper goes up the black wall in summer. It's not up the wall in winter because it's deciduous. But during the heat wave, we really noticed the extra insulation that it gave the kitchen wall. It covers the kitchen wall, and the kitchen was noticeably cooler than the other rooms in the house during the heat wave. I know there's quite a lot of research going on at the moment about using climbing plants such as ivy for insulation, and I think there's a great deal of future in this. People used to cover their houses with climbers and creepers, but then of course it was difficult to paint the houses or to repair the brick. And then people started to say that climbers and creepers damage the brickwork. In fact, we've discovered they don't damage the brickwork. They can get under guttering and move roof tiles, so you do need to keep them under control. But they can be hugely beneficial, not only for wildlife and for improving air quality, but for insulating your building against the heat and the cold. So I hope there's going to be lots more research on that in the future. I believe the RHS in Britain is doing some. Amongst the things that happened in the garden this month was the photographer Michael Buck came down to video me washing my silver birches. I'd normally wash my silver birches in November, and I do wash the trunks because it makes them stand out beautifully in the winter garden. And even in the summer, people come out and say, "My God, that silver birch is amazing. What variety is it?" And I say, "Well, it's just the ordinary Jack Montii, but I wash it," and whereupon they fall apart laughing. Michael Buck wasn't doing a how-to. He was doing it as an artistic project. He's probably going to do an exhibition of it. So he came and used smoke and a film camera, not a digital camera, and he's done it in black and white. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. If you've enjoyed this, do please hit like, because then I'll know you'd like to see more garden tours. And if you would like to make your garden more gorgeous, but you don't have a lot of time, and you want to keep an eye on the budget, then subscribe to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel for tips, ideas and inspiration. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.